What is up, everyone? So today I want to talk about oil and gas and why I'm so bullish on that sector as a whole. In my past videos I went over some of my favorite oil stocks and oil ETFs. In this video I want to go over why I'm so bullish on the oil sector. And this has to do with long-term supply and demand and underinvestment in oil. Also, recently we've been draining down our stockpiles of crude oil, and we're now within the 5-year average. So all this is very bullish signs, and at the same time, oil stocks have been just crushed. Even though oil has recovered from a low of 28, it's gone all the way back up to about 60 to 65 within the last month or two. And oil stocks are still just so depressed. The sector as a whole, people are still just so negative on oil, and they think that it's going to be lower for longer, and it's going to stay below 60 bucks a barrel for decades to come. And that's just not the case. We have record low investment in oil, and they're actually projecting a 2 trillion underinvestment in oil through 2020. It takes a lot of money to develop and explore new fields to keep supply coming in. And since oil's been so depressed, there just hasn't been that much investment in oil. So the first couple of charts I'm going to show you is a chart of U.S. crude storage. And 2015, really from 2014 through 2017, we've been really oversupplied in oil, and that's why we saw oil go from 100 bucks a barrel down to 28. And now we're seeing those stockpiles draw down, and actually it's drawn down to pretty much the 5-year average. So yeah, as you can see, the red line is 2018, and the blue line is actually the 5-year average, and we're pretty much right at the 5-year average. And from here, going into driving season, in the summer, there's going to be more demand, and that's going to continue to draw down a little bit. So really, I see into late 2018, 2019, we're going to see this continue to draw down, and I think 2019 to 2020 is when we could really see a price spike just due to that underinvestment in oil. And in this chart, it shows the U.S. crude oil stocks, and then it's got a 5-year average band in there. So as you can see, 2014 through 2016, 17, we were pretty oversupplied. Now we're right in the middle of the 5-year average. So this is very supportive for oil prices. So the next chart that I want to show you is days of supply. And that just shows, if everyone stopped producing oil tomorrow, how many days we would have left in reserves. From about 2014 to 2017, we've been at about 3 days over the 5-year average. Usually from about 2008 to 2014, we were at about 20 to 22 days of supply, and then from 2014 to 2017, we were at about 23 to 26 days of supply. So a few days over it. And that 3 days doesn't seem like much, but the oil and gas market the demand is so inelastic, and what that means is if supply goes, or if price goes from 50 to 100, demand is not going to fluctuate that much. Demand is pretty much constant. So that's what that means when demand is inelastic. So that's why you see these huge price swings in the price of oil from 100 in 2014 down to 28 in I think 2016. Back in 08, you saw a peak of around $145 a barrel. Now it's at about 60 to 65, just because we are pretty much at equilibrium right now. So yeah, now the market's pretty much at equilibrium. So from here, I want to go over what the projections are for demand and supply. So 2018, we're expected to consume 100 million barrels of oil per day, and on average from about 08 to present day here, we've grown about 1.5 million barrels of oil per year. So back in 08, I think we consumed around 10 million less. So it's grown about 1.5 million barrels of oil per day. And these next couple charts, this was a study from OPEC. And if you don't know, OPEC is basically oil exporting countries, mainly in the Middle East. And I think this study was done about a year ago, and they were projecting 28 consumption to be around 98 million barrels of oil per day. And that is quite wrong, actually. We're expected to do 100 million barrels of oil per day this year. And then into 2020, We're expected to go up to about 103 million barrels of oil per day. So as you can see, if you take the average, we've grown about 1.5 million barrels of oil per day per year. If you just take that average, so in 2025, we're expected to do about 110 million barrels of oil per day. So obviously, as you can see, demand is growing, and it's grown pretty much every year of the last century, except for 2 times, and that was the oil price shock back in the 70s and in 2008 during that recession. That's the only time that demand has gone down. So it's quite obvious, demand is going to keep going up, and I think it's projected to go up until about 2050, and then that's when electric vehicles are expected to start to take over, and then from there, it's going to decline quite rapidly. But until then, it's expected to, keep going up year over year, unless we were to see, a major recession again like '08. So yeah, as you can see, quite obviously, demand's going to keep going up. So the question is, where's the supply going to come from? Like I said, we're pretty much at equilibrium right now as far as supply and demand goes. We're at the 5-year average. So where's the supply going to come from? And as you know, Venezuela, their oil production has been declining quite rapidly because obviously they're experiencing hyperinflation, and the country is pretty much going to hell. So we can expect their oil to continue to decline. The U.S. Is about the only country that's growing in oil production right now. I think last year we did about 10 million barrels of oil per day, and in 2018, at the end of 2018, we're expected to end the year at around 11 to 11.25 million barrels of oil per day. So yeah, really the only country that's growing demand is the US. So yeah, and that's pretty much expected to cap out at around 11.2 to 12 million barrels of oil per day by 2020. That's just kind of the expected limits that are on the US. The US is really the only one that's increasing supply. All other countries, including OPEC, if you didn't know, they signed an agreement I think a year ago, and they signed an agreement to cap production at around 30 million barrels of oil per day. But if you didn't know, they capped out at pretty much their peak. And there's a lot of theories that they just capped out at the max that they can produce. There's a lot of theories that they really can't produce much more, having to do with how much their oil fields can produce. Like I said, it takes a lot of time to produce and develop new oil fields. So yeah, all in all, with all the other countries but the U.S., pretty much capped out at production. Canada is increasing production a little bit, but really the only countries that are increasing supply right now are the U.S. and Canada. All other countries are pretty much capped out at what they can produce. They haven't put any new money into new fields. And as I said before, there's been a $2 trillion underinvestment in oil the last 3 years. So you're starting to see that with all these other countries, with how they're pretty much capped out at what they can produce right now. The U.S. can increase a little bit, but that's pretty much capped out at around 11 to 12 million barrels of oil per day. Really from here, the only way that I see oil going is up. Even if oil sticks around $60 to $70 a barrel this year, I do see it going back up in 2019 to 2020. So yeah, all those combined are pretty bullish factors for oil. Oil stocks are really very depressed right now. They're priced as if oil is never going to go back up, and that's just been the sentiment towards oil and oil stocks, just due to how low oil has been the last 3 years. So I see this as a very low risk investment actually, because it's not expected that it's going to go back up, and it's quite obvious that demand is growing so rapidly and supply is not going to meet that demand in the future. So like I said, I see the downside as very low, and the upside is quite high. And one of my favorite quotes from Warren Buffett is, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful." And obviously, people are quite fearful of oil, and this is a time to be greedy right now. Oil stocks are just priced so low right now. It's a great time to get in. There's very low downside here. So I hope this helps. I'll provide some links down below on some studies done from EIA and OPEC, and you can look into this a little bit further. But it's a very interesting sector. There's a lot of factors that play into it. Geopolitical, Middle East tension. those all play into oil as well. There's a lot of factors influencing oil. So it's a very interesting market to study. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I just wanted to kind of go over why I am so bullish on oil. The sector as a whole is just so beat up, and the market as a whole is pretty overvalued right now. And this is one of the few sectors that has a lot of value in it still. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.